Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I am super excited today. Super excited. We have a great guest. Patrick Jacobwith is the CEO and general counsel and partner at Sunset Technologies, which is the largest dental-focused MSP in the U.S. Sunset specializes in technology integration, security, and compliance for their dental customers. Sunset also hosts the DSO Technology Summit, which is being held September 13th through the 15th in Nashville, Tennessee, one of my favorite cities. Thanks, Patrick, for being here. Very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Laskin. Hello to everybody. It's great to be here. I'm looking forward to catching up with you.
Yeah. Speaking of catching up, we've known each other for a while, but haven't talked to each other in a few years because I used to talk a lot about HIPAA. I know, which we'll get into, and then basically because our products went in a different direction. Then now talking about the Cures Act, and so it's kind of come full circle on compliance in my world, which has had us. So it's great reconnecting with you and catching up and learning about all the cool things you're doing. So tell us a little bit about what Sunset's doing and how you're leading the charge for technology and compliance.
Yeah, thank you again. So, Sunset has been in business since 2004. We are, as you said, the largest dental focused MSP in the United States. We have grown over the last 7, 8 years to become a national player. And that's very important for us. We are offering not just the traditional IT outsourcing. We like to say we do a lot more than just fix your printer when it's broken. Still, that's sort of a mindset a lot of the dentists and customers have of what we do. But there's a lot more to that. And certainly, as you mentioned, cybersecurity is a really big focus for us. I'm personally a member of InfraGard, which allows me to have a little bit higher clearance with the FBI. We get daily flash traffic. We take that very seriously on the cyber side. Like you mentioned, the HIPAA compliance piece is growing in importance and more leveraging technology to be compliant with HIPAA. And those are a couple of topics I actually speak on nationally. But beyond that, Sunset is providing over 1,000 customers nationwide with day-to-day IT support. And I say our superpower, if you want to call it that, is integrating the environment. So dentists like you like to go out and buy cool stuff. Certainly there's hardware, there's software, there's printers, there's scanners, there's x-ray machines, all kinds of great things in that environment that allow you to see patients, allow you to drive revenue. Our job is to help it all talk to each other. So we are integrators, truly. That is the key thing that we're doing behind the scenes, as well as, again, keeping the environments safe and sound through patch updates and other software updates, and making sure that the security is at a high level. So that's the short version. We love what we do. Our company philosophy is rooted in, and this comes from both myself and Brad, who's my partner. We want our customers and actually our team to feel rest assured. So we've got it. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening, but if you put your trust in us, we'll handle it for you.
That's great. Thanks. And I want to unpack the big bullet points you said, but kind of in reverse order, because obviously interconnectedness and integration is kind of my thing right now with Tooth Apps, where we're talking about the Cures Act and data accessibility and creating the dental health information exchange through connected dentistry. So I'm going to go in reverse order from sort of connected dentistry, interconnectedness to then compliance, and then end with cybersecurity, which I know all three of these are huge deals right now. I personally feel that the biggest opportunity, maybe not the biggest threat, but the biggest opportunity in dentistry is this interoperability, interconnectedness. And I feel like we're at a liminal moment in our industry where, I call it dentistry 3.0, because dentistry 1.0, if you think about the advances in analog dentistry, high-speed handpieces and four-handed dentistry, and having the dental practice and just kind of traditional dentistry, moving on to dentistry 2.0, which is all digital, things like digital charts, CAD cams, CT imaging, even AI, the way it's being presented today, I would put in that digital category.
Mhm.
But we're right on the cusp of what I believe of dentistry 3.0. And I think that the Cures Act, interoperability, the dental health information exchange is going to open that. And I call it interconnected. Things like teledentistry, interoperability, connecting the medical dental integration or oral body connection, or whatever you want to call that, is going to be facilitated by this interconnectedness. And you're right. I mean, it's not just within our practices, but it's not just outside the practice. It's also within the practice because there's all these tools and technology that you're helping with this, you know, interconnection is kind of how I view it. So where do you see, like, being a large forward thinking MSP, where do you feel like, I agree with you completely that, like, fixing your printer is not the highest value service that you guys do. It is this integrating everything.
Mhm.
So where do you see Sunset fitting in that? I mean, well, A, do you agree with me that this is kind of a liminal moment where we're switching over to that? And B, where does Sunset fit into that story?
Oh, great question. Thank you very much. And that couldn't agree more. We are definitely at a significant inflection point, in terms of how care is going to be provided. Not just with, like you said, AI, but the actual, like you called it, interoperability or integration of real data in real time, potentially that allows the practitioner to operate, in a different way and make decisions based on a better set of information. Sunset is really in a very key spot in our humble opinion in a couple of ways. First, as as we're building and as DSOs and dental practices are building the engine, if the data that you want to share isn't available, if those underlying systems aren't talking to each other in just some of the basic ways, and not just with delays. Real time is nice, but even just the data isn't transferring, it isn't moving, it's getting dropped. You've got, other network issues that might be affecting, the overall performance. That's exactly the area that we can help everybody to build the right engine that's going to feed the larger components that you're talking about. And then you got the big giant clinical brains like yourself and others that are thinking about how to make that a different experience again for the dentists and the patients. I think the other place that we've started to get some traction is we're also in a good spot to help people understand what's talking well with each other right now. So you mentioned our DSO Tech conference. I got a chance to stand on stage last year, and this is an annual event. And I challenged the room with talk to the folks like us who are responsible for integrating before you make your purchases. And I invited the partners in the room to talk to us about how they could make their software or hardware, whatever they're selling, again, operate better in some of these environments. So we can certainly take on a lot more of an advisory role with the clinics before they're making purchases. And not to say that we're backing anybody, it's more just to say, hey, listen, if you want to try to have these things talk to each other, you're going to have to make some other decisions around the technology you have there to support this endpoint that you're looking for. So we are truly engineers in that respect.
That's great. And it's interesting because we I think we've both been on a little bit of the same journey where obviously I had my dental practice and the dental practices where Sunset actually wasn't my MSP, and then
Mhm.
then sold my practices to a large group and worked there. And now you guys are servicing large groups. And what's interesting to me with the second point, I said I was going to go backwards. So moving on from interoperability
Yeah.
to compliance, we both have spoken about compliance for quite a while, and it's really slapped me in the face this year that DSOs care about compliance, because when I speak to general dentists, obviously I'm making generalizations here, but it's the a lot of times when it comes to compliance, the general feeling is like, I don't really want to worry about that. And it's speaking because I speak both to a lot of general dentists and like who are independent or small groups, or else, and then also DSOs. And what's shocking to me is how much more, the larger the group, the more they're actually not just interested, but the more compliant they are. Do you
Mhm.
agree with that?
Yeah, we are definitely seeing that. And the fun part in that for us and the experiences we've started to have is we've developed actually a scanning tool that allows us to scan the environment, give some feedback on security, which we'll talk later, but also just how it might relate to compliance. And we have a written report. As these DSOs are growing, as you talk about in the larger ones, they're not slowing down. A lot of them are, very acquisitive and adding, tens of 20 clinics a month sometimes. One of the things that has caught their attention is not bringing risk into the organization. So not only on the backside, like you say, they're very compliant, but they're understanding more that this one clinic in, this whatever state they happen to be operating in, they may not have invested in some of these pieces of equipment or software and or compliance that now presents a problem. So we've coined the term, we can do a scan and we can help them do upfront due diligence. And then before they're actually brought in the onboarding phase, we get them what we call ready for prime time.
Mm.
So they can also sit in there and then feed the data to the big, mothership DSO on the backside, because those are all technical needs that have to happen. And so we remediate the environment to get them ready for prime time.
Yeah, no, I don't know if you agree with this, but I feel like if we were looking at HIPAA violations, the
Mhm.
dental industry looks the bucket of that's holding that looks like a wiffle ball where there's leaks all over the spot, all over the place. And so it's almost impossible in dentistry to be. So, for example,
Right.
Tooth Apps, our platform that we just created, is the only application that I'm aware of that has user permissioning based on a major factor, which is whether you're in the line of care or not. So, if you're the CFO of a DSO, you can see all of the data, but none of the PHI. It's all blurred out. And so I talk, and the reason why I mention this is I feel like even those who are trying to be in compliant, it can be very difficult. So, I mean, getting people ready for prime time has to be a huge
Yeah.
lift.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and I couldn't agree more on the wiffle ball. I love that. I might actually borrow that.
Go ahead.
That's such a great, visual because, you scoop through the air, you scoop through the water, and there's still a whole bunch coming out, partly because of still a lack of understanding. I've had a chance like you to talk about compliance here, HIPAA compliance for a bunch of years. I've been doing it, heck, for 8+ years, and largely what we're still seeing, even those people that want to move down that path, it's something they're still not fully understanding or appreciating. And more because of digital, a large component of HIPAA compliance is wrapped up in the technology and what you've got going
Okay.
on there and how you can cover those areas and check those boxes. And that's an area again where we're able to help our our business partners, our trading partners get, better in terms of what they can do. And then understanding that, God forbid, there is something that happens, we've got a plan for them all the way through. That includes, the worst catastrophic thing, and then what do you do on the backside? And we've helped a whole bunch of clinics walk through that, both cyber but HIPAA compliance experience, even after they've been hit.
That's great. And before we move on to cyber, and maybe a good transition is that we mentioned the Cures Act and HIPAA compliance. I
Mhm.
just want to point out to the listeners that may not know, because the Cures Act, unfortunately, even though it was passed in 2016, is still very new to almost every dentist. So it's obviously by the ONC, the same people that created and enforce HIPAA. HIPAA is about privacy and security of patients' data, or just data in general. And the Cures Act, the 21st Century Cures Act, is basically about data accessibility. So you can look at them as people. You can look at them almost at odds, right? So privacy and security and accessibility. However, if it's private and secure, that means we also have to make sure that the people that need the information to provide quality care have access to it. And right now, that's another big thing. That's my major focus right now. But whole nother talk shows. But
Yes.
let's see, right. So I put a pin in that. Just I wanted to point it out because obviously you guys can help with HIPAA compliance and cures
Yep.
compliance, but I want to define for the audience kind of what those are. Do you agree?
I do, and just thank you. And just to add one thing that I see when I'm out talking about HIPAA, the one bright line, well, there's a lot of them, but a bright line from HIPAA and the Cures Act is the accessibility for the patient in the HIPAA setting. Because any barrier, even if you're charging a fee, that a lot of clinics went through this whole thing of because in the HIPAA regulation, there was the ability to charge a reasonable fee if they wanted a record, all that kind of stuff. That has been also a big movement, just within the HIPAA regulation itself. But certainly, I think guided by, if not, led by where the Cures Act is headed, which I think is excellent.
Well, great point. Actually, HIPAA does have a clause where you were required to give patients timely and complete records. And
Mhm.
that's not possible today, other than tooth apps, frankly. But I mean, I hate to say it that way, but it's kind of true,
It
which
is true.
means that right now, offices are every time a patient says complains to the ONC, and there's a spot on the ONC where they can go complain. Offices are paying somewhere between $10,000 and $80,000, which is I can't believe that more people aren't talking about this, but we're bringing it
Yep,
to them today, right?
that's right.
Well, let's move on to after we freaked everybody out. Let's move on to cybersecurity because that's a whole
Sure.
nother layer of freak out where I don't think we go a quarter without a major DSO getting hit by a cyber attack,
Mhm.
right? And so this is not a space that I mean, I've been part of an organization that was hit with a cyber attack, and I read about them all the time. I know people are freaking out. So I would just love to hear, and they're not slowing down, right?
Yep.
So what advice do you have for the people who are listening today that have a dental practice or a group of dental practices that are freaking out about what's going on? Or maybe if they're not freaking out enough, there's probably two camps: people that are freaking out too much, or
Yes.
people that aren't freaking out enough. So,
Yeah.
what would you say to them?
Oh, thank you. And this is an area, you're right. This is an area of absolute passion for Sunset and for me. There are a couple of things. Regardless of where you fall, yeah, the folks that are freaking out too much know that what we're applying at Sunset is the NIST standard, NIST. We add a little bit to the front and the back to that because there's certain components. There's 5 components, and that is again a standard that is supported by the FBI. The point being that that standard provides for what do you do at the beginning? Basically, you make sure you know everything in your environment, and then there's certain programs in the middle of monitoring and alerts, and then on the back end, what are you going to do if there is an event? And how do you remediate that event, or how do you, fix it so that there's as little disruption? Business continuity is a big term that is used in our area. How do you make sure that that disruption is as minimal as possible? And the add to that on the end, companies we partnered with are actual cyber liability insurers because it's getting much more difficult for dental practices and DSOs to get cyber liability insurance or to maintain a decent premium. So, on that end of if they're overreacting, know that we've got your back. And that's kind of how we talk about it. But have a complete program. And then again, if something happens, you've got those boxes checked. But more what we see is people that are not taking it seriously. It's apathy in a real respect, and that is I haven't been hit. I'm reading about it. It's just the big companies. It's Marriott. It's no offense to Marriott, other large organizations that are very visible. Those are the ones that are getting the reports. But there's a heck of a lot of other organizations, especially small business, which is the highest percent of businesses that are hit by cyber attacks. And the biggest one is ransomware. So inside of our NIST standard program, what we're also deploying is a program that has a huge and heavy component of employee education. If we can keep this top of stack all year long, all the time, versus I come out and do my presentation once a year and everybody thinks about it for a few weeks and then they forget, oh, what did that Patrick say? I don't remember. Let's keep an active and dynamic program of education in front of everyone. So they're still tuned into, yes, I'm focused on giving great patient care, but I have to make sure I'm not clicking on this link or opening this attachment. I want to stop and ask questions first because that's still one of the biggest avenues in and the biggest areas of exposure for all of these businesses.
Yeah, and I want to just parrot a couple points that you said. Number one, I talk to dentists, who have two chair offices, and I talk to the people who are running the largest DSOs, and everybody's been hit, like everybody.
Yep.
And so this is something that you are not vulnerable, that you're not protected from on any level, right? And
Mhm.
so everybody has some exposure, and so I love that you're focused on education because I think that's probably the number one prevention, right? Also, it just blows my mind. So I mean, at Tooth Apps, because we do people's calendars and we do interoperability, we have the like a backup of everybody's calendar and what they're doing.
Yep.
And so I'm talking to people about this, and we didn't even like mention that as a value add because it's just something that we did because we thought that everybody had that covered.
Mhm.
Talk about naivete, you know what I mean? It's
Oh my
like
gosh. Yeah.
they don't, and even one of the largest groups that I've worked with got hit by ransomware and whole place shut down. Like they had no way to look at their schedule because it wasn't backed up externally anywhere.
Right.
I mean, I just, and so, I mean, I guess if you're listening and that is you're not alone, but it's time to take action, right? Both from a
Oh,
education
yeah.
and from a backup perspective, correct?
Oh, thank you. And yeah, that is if there is one other, yeah. I mean, besides having a firewall, antivirus, some of the basic blocking and tackling, if you don't have not only a backup, but there's a backup is not a backup. And that's why I use the word business continuity. I
Hmm.
can have a backup that you know, carry home because we still see practices as
Oh
very old school.
boy.
No, not to be, sort of calling people out, but that's so old school and that isn't going to protect you. Because if you have only a local backup and a ransomware, these cyber criminals are smart and they are definitely gonna pollute the local backup as quickly as they possibly can. They're astute, they know. So we need to have something going offsite, usually stored in multiple places so that, there's a way to screen against that and go back to the clean backup. That's the whole point. So thank you for calling that out. That is part of what we call business continuity. So think about, if you're hit, what are you going to do to restore your environment with the closest to the time you were hit data? And that's going to shorten your window of time to get back up and running.
Well, you stole the wiffle ball from me. I'm going to steal business continuity because
All
with
yours.
because what we do, you can just pull up from your phone and then take a look at your schedule if your local drive gets corrupted, right? So
That
I
is,
love that.
I love
That's
that
great.
too. Yeah.
Well, so obviously there's probably people listening that have a couple gaps in some of the things that we've talked about. I don't think either of us believe that the vast majority of people listening today have this covered. So, two things. One, how can people get a hold of you and Sunset so that they can help fill those gaps? And two, where can they go get more information about both Sunset, but then also the DSO Technology Summit?
Yeah. Thank you again. It's been great to be on this podcast with you. www.sunsetsecure.com. That is where you can find us. We have a link to the DSO Technology Summit right on our website. You can just do a search and find, but we have it right somewhere on the landing page there, right at the front. As you mentioned, that conference we host is in Nashville this year. It's in September. We'd love to see more folks come out. But certainly, if you have any questions at all about these topics and more around IT and integration, sunsetsecure.com. Please come and find us, and we'll be happy to help you out.
Great. Well, Patrick, thanks again for being on the call with me today, and I look forward to talking with you soon.
Well, it's been great to reconnect with you after all these years. So a welcome chat. Thank you, Dr. Laskin.